For 47 years I held it in. Through every birthday, every fake apology, I stayed polite. Then 6 months ago, I didn't explode, I simply stopped. My revenge story isn't about fire. It's about a quiet, deliberate stillness that began when I left my house in Santee. And it all came to a point the day my son texted me, asking for his father's streaming password. The buzz from my phone was insistent. It vibrated across the smooth, cool granite of the kitchen island, the sound sharp in the quiet of my new apartment. It was 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. For 47 years, 11 a.m. had a different sound. It was the scrape of my sponge against a plate. It was the sound of me wiping his fingerprints off the refrigerator handle, the lemon polish stinging my nose. In our Santee house, 11 a.m. was always about bracing. It was the hour before Arthur came home for lunch. His mood an invisible weight I had to measure the moment I heard his car in the driveway. Here, in my small, bright rental in Little Italy, 11 a.m. smelled like salt from the bay and coffee from the cafe downstairs, and the only fingerprints on my appliances were my own. The phone buzzed again, skittering an inch closer to the edge. I looked at the screen. It was my son, Mark. I had not spoken to him in 3 days. I had not spoken to his father in 6 months. I read the text preview. "Mom, Dad says you're not answering." I picked up the phone. The glass felt warm. I opened the full message. "Mom, Dad says you're not answering. He needs the password for the streaming service. He wants to watch the game." I read the words. I held my breath, a stupid old habit. I let it out slowly. He didn't need a password. He needed my password. The one I set up. The one I paid for. The 3 little dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. Mark was typing again. He says it's the one you set up. There it was. The blame. The invisible finger pointing. You are the problem. You are being difficult. You are disturbing the peace. My peace. For decades, I was the one who kept it. I kept it at birthdays. I remembered my 60th. Mark and his wife Sarah had driven down. Arthur presented me with a large, flat box wrapped in festive paper. I opened it. It was an ironing board. "The old one squeaks," Arthur announced to the table. "Drives me mad when I'm trying to read the paper." He smiled, pleased. I smiled too. I said thank you. I folded the wrapping paper into a neat square. I kept the peace after every fake apology. He would call my small baking business, the one thing that was just mine, my little hobby. He would tell friends at dinner parties that it was cute, a way for me to stay busy. When I told him, late at night, that his words hurt, he would sigh. A deep put-upon sound. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he would say. And the conversation was over. My feelings were the problem, not his words. I held it all in. I stayed polite. I waited. I didn't even know what I was waiting for, but I waited. The time came 6 months ago. It was not a birthday. It was not an apology. It was a Tuesday. I heard the garage door roll up at 9 a.m. right on schedule. I heard the clinking sound of his golf clubs as he loaded them into the trunk of his car. I waited until the sound of his engine faded. I did not pack. I did not write a note. I walked into the dining room, opened the hutch, and took out my grandmother's silver. I wrapped the heavy forks and knives in a kitchen towel. I put Buster's leash on him. My little terrier, old and gray, looked up at me, his tail wagging for a simple walk. I called the car service I had looked up the week before. While I waited, I found a yellow sticky note. I wrote down the new password for the streaming service. Arthur had insisted on the upgrade, but he had no patience for setting it up. I stuck the note to the corner of the router in his office. I left my house key on the counter next to his mail. I picked up Buster, walked out the front door, and got into the waiting car. I did not look back. Now 6 months later, in my kitchen in San Diego, the phone buzzed again. "Mom? Please?" Mark's text. My son still trying to keep the peace, still trying to manage his father's temper. A job I had trained him for, just by my own silence. I thought about the game. I thought about the 70-inch television in the Santee living room, a room I was never allowed to redecorate. I thought about Arthur, staring at a blank screen, growing red in the face. I looked at my own reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I saw the lines around my mouth. I saw the gray in my hair. I saw a woman who had been polite for a very long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I held it in through every birthday. I held it in through every, "I'm sorry you feel that way." I didn't explode. I just stopped. I typed one word, "No." I hit send. Then my finger moved to the Do Not Disturb setting. I pressed the small crescent moon icon. The screen went dark. A great, wonderful quiet settled over the room. I walked to the stove and filled my kettle with water. I set it on the burner. I waited for the whistle. It was the only sound in the apartment, and it was the sound I had started. The kettle whistled. The sound was high and sharp in the small kitchen, and it made me jump. I turned the burner off. The quiet rushed back in. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand on the handle. It was my kettle. I had chosen it. I had filled it. And now I would have my tea. I poured the boiling water over the tea bag in my favorite mug, a plain white one. I watched the water darken. I opened the refrigerator, took out a lemon, and cut a thin slice. The sharp, clean smell filled the air. I dropped the lemon into the mug. Arthur always said lemon ruined good tea. He said it was a fussy, needless thing. I carried my mug to the window. Buster, my old terrier, was already there. He'd woken from his nap on the small rug by the door and stood, his tail giving a single, hopeful thump. "All right, old man," I said. My voice sounded different in this apartment. Lower, calmer. I drank my tea while I put on my walking shoes. They were sneakers. Simple, gray, comfortable. Not the stiff leather flats I wore in Santee, the ones that pinched my toes, but looked appropriate for running errands. We went down in the elevator. It was quiet, just a soft rush of air. The doors opened onto a clean, bright lobby. The street outside was already busy. The air in Little Italy was different. It smelled like yeast and garlic from the bakery on the corner, and underneath that, the sharp, salty smell of the bay. In Santee, the air always smelled like lawnmowers and the hot, dry pavement. Buster trotted ahead, his nose working. He was an old dog, but this new place had given him a new energy. He stopped to sniff a large rosemary bush growing in a cracked clay pot outside a restaurant. We walked our new route, down India Street, past the cafes setting up their outdoor tables. Men in aprons hosed down the sidewalks. A truck was delivering produce, bright red tomatoes and bundles of dark greens. We crossed at the corner and walked toward the water. The bay was a deep, flat blue. A handful of sailboats rested on the water. I remembered my walks in Santee. The same 3 streets every single day. The same perfectly green lawns. The silence of closed garage doors. If I saw a neighbor, we would wave. The same polite, distant wave. We never stopped to talk. There was nothing to say. Here, I passed a man arranging flowers in buckets outside his shop. "Good morning," he said. He had a kind, tired face. "Good morning," I replied. It was simple. It was nothing. But my chest felt lighter. On the way back, I stopped at the small market. I bought a carton of brown eggs, a stick of unsalted butter, and a container of milk. The cashier, a young woman with blue hair, smiled at me. "Have a good one," she said. "You too," I said. Back in my apartment, I put the groceries away. The kitchen was small, but it was mine. The counters were white and clear. I looked at my phone, still dark on the charger. Do not disturb. I felt a small, solid thing settle in my stomach. This was it. This was the stillness. I decided to bake. I had not baked in 6 months. Not since I left. My little hobby. The thing Arthur called cute. He never ate what I made. He said he was watching his figure, but he insisted I make my lemon bars for his golf buddies every year. I pulled my heavy stand mixer from the cupboard. It was one of the few things I had insisted on shipping. I opened a drawer and pulled out my old wooden recipe box. The lid was dark, the corners worn smooth from my hands and my mother's hands before me. I opened the lid. The faint, sweet smell of vanilla and old dry paper came out. I loved this box. I started flipping through the cards. The ink was faded. My grandmother's looping script. My mother's neat, careful print. My own hurried writing. apple pie, graham, holiday bread, Mark's birthday cake, chocolate. My fingers stopped. I remembered his 5th birthday. He had smeared chocolate frosting all over his face. Arthur had been angry about the mess on the new dining room chair. I pushed the thought away. I kept flipping, looking for the lemon bar recipe. I reached the last card, Apple Brown Betty. Behind it, there was something else. It was a plain, white envelope, folded in half. It was yellowed at the creases. It was not a recipe. I pulled it out. It was sealed. There was no writing on the front or back. I turned it over in my hands. The paper felt thin, brittle. I had no memory of this. I had not seen it since I packed the box. I did not remember putting it there. Why was it hidden? Why was it sealed? I looked at the quiet phone on the counter. I looked at the secret envelope in my hand. I realized I had not just been holding things in from Arthur. I had been holding them from myself. My thumbnail found the edge of the flap. I started to tear it open. My thumbnail slid under the flap of the old envelope. The paper was dry and thin, and it tore with a quiet, ripping sound. I pulled the flap open. Inside there was a single piece of paper, folded into thirds. It was that old computer paper, the kind with the green and white bars. It felt flimsy in my hands. I unfolded it. It was a bank statement. The date in the top corner was from 30 years ago. 1995. The name on the account wasn't just mine. It read, Elena's Baking. I stared at the name. I had forgotten. I had completely forgotten. I remembered the day. I had taken a cash order for a large party, a friend of a friend. Arthur was out of town. I took the check, drove to a small credit union in the next town over, and opened this account. I told Arthur the client had canceled. The lie had felt heavy and dangerous. I used the money from small jobs he didn't know about. Cash from a church bake sale. A neighbor's anniversary party. I put it all here. It was my secret. My first one. My eyes scanned the page, looking for the balance. It was at the bottom, printed in that old, faded dot matrix type, $4.18.37. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was not a fortune, but it was not nothing. It was mine. It was money I had earned and hidden. I had stopped putting money in, I suppose. I had just let it sit. I had let myself forget, because even remembering it felt dangerous. I was still holding the paper when my phone, silent on the counter, suddenly lit up and began to ring. The sound was loud, a shrill, startling noise. I dropped the statement on the counter. How could it ring? I had set it to Do Not Disturb. I looked at the screen. Mark. It was an emergency override. The setting he only used when his daughter was sick, or when he had been in that small car accident. My hand was shaking. I grabbed the phone. Mark, are you all right? Is Sarah okay? We're fine, Mom. Everyone's fine. His voice was tight, strained, the old peacekeeper voice. Then why? Why did you use the override? I knew you were ignoring me. I'm sorry, but he's really working himself up. I closed my eyes. He? Not Dad. Mark, that isn't my problem anymore. My voice was quiet, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. Mom, please, he sighed. It was a long, tired sound, the sound of a man caught in the middle. He couldn't watch the game. He started looking at the joint bank accounts. He's talking about calling his lawyer. There is nothing for his lawyer to find, Mark. I know. It's not that. He paused. I heard him take a breath. Look, Sarah and we're planning his birthday party. His 75th. It's in a few weeks. I said nothing. I looked at the old bank statement on my counter. $4,218.37. It's a big one, Mom. All his friends will be there. The grandkids. What do you want, Mark? Just come, he said, the words rushing out. Please, just for an hour. It would smooth things over. It would show everyone that things are fine, that we're still a family. Show everyone. My politeness, my smile, the tools he wanted me to use to fix this, to make his father calm down. I felt a cold, familiar exhaustion slide over me. I was 6 months gone, and I was still the one responsible for Arthur's feelings. Mom? Did you hear me? Just 1 hour. For me, please. I thought of my quiet apartment. I thought of my walk by the bay. I thought of this old piece of paper. This proof of a life I had tried to start 30 years ago. I have to go, Mark. But the party? Will you think about it? The old words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. The words I had used for 47 years. I'll think about it. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I stared at my phone. The screen was dark again. But the quiet in my apartment was gone. The stillness was broken. My hands were trembling, so I gripped the edge of the granite counter to hold them steady. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The phone was dark. The room was silent. I'll think about it. I had said it. The words had just come out, a reflex. The old familiar lie I used to buy myself a moment of peace. The lie that meant stop pushing me but sounded like yes. My hand was still on the granite counter. It was cold. Under my other hand, the bank statement was flimsy. Elena's Baking. I had been so proud of that name. I had imagined a small shop, a glass counter, people smiling. Arthur had laughed when I mentioned it, just once. A shop? Elena, be serious. Who would run the house? I had folded the idea up, just like I folded this envelope, and I had hidden it away. I looked at the balance. 4,018.37. It was real. It was money I had earned with my own hands, with my own recipes. Mark's call about Arthur, about the joint accounts, about his lawyer. It all felt like a threat, a way to pull me back, to remind me that everything I had was tangled up with him. But this was not tangled. I picked up my phone. I did not look at Mark's text. I opened the internet. I typed Santee Federal Credit Union. It still existed. It had not been bought by a bigger bank. It was just one branch, the original one. It was on Mission Gorge Road, not far from my old house. A sudden, sharp decision cut through the fog. I grabbed my purse and my keys. I took the old statement, folded it carefully, and put it in my wallet. I hadn't driven back to Santee since I left. The freeways were the same, but I felt different. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, just as Arthur had taught me. A predictable driver is a safe driver, he always said. I drove in the middle lane, going exactly the speed limit. The exit ramp was familiar. The streets were familiar. The hot, dry air. The smell of dust and sun-baked pavement. My stomach was tight. I felt like I was doing something wrong, something secret. I felt like I was 16 sneaking out. I was 72. I pulled into the small parking lot. The building was old, a low brick rectangle with a faded blue sign. It looked exactly the same. I turned off the car. I sat for a minute. The air conditioning clicked off, and the car started to heat up. I took a deep breath. I was not here to see Arthur. I was not here to see Mark. I was here for me. I walked inside. The lobby was cool and quiet. It smelled like old paper and clean carpets. There were 2 teller windows, both empty. At a desk in the corner, a woman was typing. A small silver nameplate on her desk read, B. Diaz, branch manager. I walked over. My heels made no sound on the carpet. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Ms. Diaz looked up. She had dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a simple blue blouse. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind. "Yes? How can I help you? I have a question about an account, a very old account. I'm not even sure it's active." "Of course," she said. She gestured to the chair in front of her desk. "Please, do you have an account number? Or your identification?" "I have this." My hand was shaking as I opened my wallet. I pulled out the old folded statement and my driver's license. I pushed the green-barred paper across the desk. Ms. Diaz picked it up. She unfolded it carefully. Her eyes scanned the paper. "Elena's Baking," she read, mostly to herself. Then she looked at my license. She looked back at me. Yes, this is an old one." She turned to her computer. The tapping of the keys was the only sound in the bank. It seemed to go on for a long time. I felt the urge to apologize for taking her time, to just get up and leave. "Here we are," she said finally. "A sole proprietorship. It's been dormant for 28 years. My stomach dropped. "Dormant? Does that mean it's gone?" "The money." "Oh no," Ms. Diaz said. She smiled, a small, professional smile. It's not gone. Dormant just means there's been no activity. We're required by law to maintain it. And, she paused, it has been earning interest. Interest? Yes, compounded quarterly. For 30 years, she typed one last time. It was a very good rate back then. She turned her monitor so I could see the screen. I saw my name. I saw the account number. And then I saw the balance, $32,450.19. I stared at the number. I read it, and then I read it again. It wasn't Arthur's money. It wasn't joint. It wasn't money he was looking at, or money his lawyer could touch. It was mine. A feeling landed in my chest, heavy and solid. It was the stillness, but it was different now. It was not empty. It was full. Ms. Diaz, I said, and my voice was perfectly steady. How do I move this money to a new bank? It's very simple, Ms. Diaz said. She slid a form across the desk. You'll just need to sign here to close the account. We can issue you a cashier's check for the full amount. You can deposit that at your new bank today. Her voice was calm and professional. She didn't act like $32,450.19 was a life-changing amount of money. But her hand was steady as she pointed to the signature line. My hand was not. I picked up the pen from her desk. It was a simple black pen chained to the counter. I pressed the tip to the paper. I wrote my name, Elena Catherine. I had not written my full name in years. It was always Mrs. Arthur or just Elena. I finished the signature. My hand stopped shaking. Ms. Diaz typed for a moment, and then a printer in the back whirred to life. She stood, walked to the printer, and returned. She held a single piece of paper. It was a check. It was a pale blue color, thick and important. She signed it, stamped it with a heavy, satisfying thunk, and slid it across the desk. Here you are, Miss Catherine. Miss Catherine, I took the check. The paper felt heavy, substantial. I looked at the number one more time. It was real. I folded it once, put it in my wallet, and snapped it shut. The sound was small, but it felt final. Thank you, I said. You've been very helpful. It's my job, she said, with that small smile. Have a good day. I walked out of the bank. The hot, dry Santee air hit me, but it felt different. It didn't feel heavy anymore. I got into my car. The interior was hot, and I turned the air conditioning on full. I drove back to San Diego. I stayed in the middle lane. I went the speed limit, but I was not just a predictable driver. I was a woman with $32,450 in her purse. It was not his money. It was not joint money. It was baking money. The drive felt faster this time. When I got back to my apartment, Buster was waiting by the door. I unclipped his leash and he trotted to his water bowl. I walked to the kitchen and placed my purse on the counter. I could feel the weight of the check inside it. The apartment was just as I left it, quiet, still. But the stillness was not empty. It was solid. It was a foundation. I looked at the recipe box, still sitting next to my stand mixer. I put my hand on the smooth, worn wood. I thought of my mother and her mother. I wondered if they, too, had kept secrets. I had to call Mark. I had left him with an, "I'll think about it." The polite lie. The lie that meant, wait. I sat on the small sofa by the window. I did not pick up the phone right away. I watched the people walking on the sidewalk below. They were all going somewhere. I picked up my phone. I went to my recent calls list. I pressed Mark. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, you're calling back? Thank God. I'll tell Dad you're coming." This is so much better. His voice was full of relief. He had already translated my silence into his preferred answer. "Mark," I said. I waited until he stopped talking. "I am calling about the party." "Yes, I'm so glad." "No, Mark." My voice was quiet, but it cut through his. "I am calling to tell you that I will not be coming to the party." There was silence. Not a good silence. A heavy, airless one. I could hear him breathing. "Mom, don't do this. Don't be like this. You said you'd think about it." "I did," I said. "And the answer is no. Just 1 hour. That's all I'm asking." "What is the big deal? You're going to make everything so much worse." "Worse for who, Mark?" I asked. The question just came out of me. I had never asked it before. His voice changed. The pleading was gone. Now it was angry. For everyone, for me. I'm the one who has to deal with him. I'm the one who has to listen to him yell and check the bank accounts and I've been doing it my whole life. Yes, I said. You have. And you just get to walk away? I am not walking away from you, Mark. I am walking away from him. It's the same thing, he shouted. I flinched, pulling the phone away from my ear. It's his 75th birthday. He's your husband. You just throw us all away? Because you're angry? Mom, that's so selfish. The word hit me. Selfish. It was the word that had kept me in Santee for 47 years. It was the word I had organized my entire life to avoid. I was holding the phone. I could hear Mark's angry breathing on the other end. Mom? Are you even listening? I looked at my purse on the counter. I looked at my teacup still by the sink. I looked at my clean, quiet apartment. I let the word sit in the air. Selfish. It was the heaviest stone he could throw. It was the word that had always worked. I had spent my life proving I was not selfish. I had kept the house quiet. I had hosted his business dinners. I had made his mother's favorite casserole, even though I hated the smell. I had folded my own needs into tiny, invisible squares, and I had put them away. Mom? Mark's voice was sharp, impatient. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for me to apologize. He was waiting for me to say, "You're right, I'm sorry, I'll come." I brought the phone back to my ear. I have to go now, Mark. My voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was just finished. Mom, don't you hang up on... I pressed the red button on the screen. The call ended. The screen went dark. I had hung up on him. I had never done that before. The stillness in my apartment returned. This time, it did not feel empty or broken. It felt solid, like the granite counter under my hands. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I walked out of my apartment, down in the quiet elevator, and into the bright San Diego afternoon. I walked 3 blocks to the bank on the corner. It was a new bank with a lot of glass. It was the one I had chosen when I moved here. I went inside. The air was cool. I took the blue cashier's check from my wallet. I went to the counter. I signed the back. For deposit only, Elena Catherine. The young man behind the counter smiled. Good afternoon. I'd like to deposit this, please, I said. He took the check. He typed. He fed the check into a small machine. He printed a receipt. It will be available tomorrow, Miss Catherine. Thank you, I said. I folded the receipt and put it in my wallet, right where the check had been. I left the bank. I did not go straight home. I walked back to the market. I went to the baking aisle. I bought a new bag of flour, not the store brand. I bought a box of unsalted butter, the expensive kind wrapped in foil. I bought a bag of pure cane sugar. I found a bag of fresh, bright yellow lemons and weighed them in my hand. I bought 6. I also bought a new, heavy 9x9-inch baking pan. I paid in cash. The paper bags were heavy, but I carried them the 2 blocks back to my building. Back in my apartment, I put Buster's leash on. I took him for a quick walk just around the block. He trotted happily. I was calm. When we got back, I gave him a treat. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink. I put on a simple blue apron I had bought last week. I pulled out the recipe box. I found the card. Elena's lemon bars. It was my own handwriting from 30 years ago. I preheated the oven. The sound of the gas clicking on was loud, then it settled into a soft whoosh. I pulled my heavy stand mixer to the center of the counter. I measured the flour, the sugar, the salt. I cut the cold butter into cubes. I dropped them into the bowl. I watched the mixer turn the ingredients into small sandy crumbs. I pressed the crust into the bottom of the new pan. I pushed it down firmly with my fingers, making sure the corners were thick. I put it in the hot oven. While the crust baked, I juiced the lemons. The sharp, clean smell filled the kitchen. It smelled like work. It smelled like something real. I cracked 4 eggs into a clean bowl. I whisked them with the sugar, the flour, and the lemon juice. The filling was a pale, smooth yellow. The timer chimed. I took the crust out. It was perfect, just lightly brown. I poured the yellow filling over the hot crust. I put the pan back in the oven. I set the timer for 20 minutes. I did not sit down. I stood in my kitchen. I washed the bowls. I wiped the counter. I dried my hands. I was not doing this for Arthur's golf buddies. I was not doing this for a church bake sale. I was not doing this to stay busy. The second timer chimed. I turned off the oven. I pulled the pan out, using my good oven mitts. The lemon bars were set. The top was smooth and pale. I set the pan on a wire rack on the counter. I looked at them. They were my hobby. They were cute. They were cooling on my counter, in my apartment. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. The lemon bars cooled on the wire rack for an hour. The air in my apartment smelled sweet and sharp, a smell that was just mine. I took a small, sharp knife from the drawer. I wiped the blade clean with a damp cloth. I cut one perfect square from the corner of the pan. I slid the spatula underneath. The shortbread crust held. I placed the square on a plain white plate and carried it to my small kitchen table. I sat down. Buster, hearing the clink of the plate, trotted over and laid his head on my knee, his tail thumping once. "It's not for you, old man," I said softly. I did not eat it right away. I just looked at it, the smooth yellow top, the pale sandy crust. I took a bite. The crust was buttery. The filling was tart and then sweet. It was the best batch I had ever made. I had not rushed it. I had not made it while listening for Arthur's car. I had made it just for this. I finished the piece, every crumb. I set the fork down. I thought about my phone. It was on the sofa, dark. I had not checked it since I hung up on Mark. He had not called back. He had not used the emergency override. The silence in the apartment was complete, but it was not heavy. I thought about the word selfish. I thought about Arthur at his party in a few weeks, surrounded by his friends. I thought about Mark, standing in the middle, trying to hold everything together. I felt a small, clean click inside my chest. It was the sound of a door I had just locked. I was not responsible for their feelings. I was not the one who had to smooth things over. Not anymore. I stood up and went back to the kitchen. I looked at the recipe box, and I looked at the pan of lemon bars. I had baked them for myself. And I had 32,450 in my new bank account. "Elena's baking," I said out loud. The two words sounded right in the quiet room. I went to my laptop. I sat at the table and opened it. I typed in the search bar. How to get a business license in San Diego. I read the city's website. It was just a list of forms. It was not hard. It just required steps. It required a fee. I had the money for the fee. I typed again. Local print shops, Little Italy. A shop was listed, just 4 blocks away. It closed at 5 p.m. It was 3 p.m. now. I went back to the kitchen. I cut the rest of the lemon bars into neat small squares. I arranged them on a simple platter I had bought last week. I covered them with plastic wrap. I put Buster's leash on. "Come on," I said. "We're going out." I carried the platter in one hand and held Buster's leash in the other. We walked down the street, past the cafes. I stopped at the flower shop. Marco, the man I had seen in the morning, was sweeping the sidewalk. "Excuse me," I said. He stopped sweeping and looked up. "I made these," I said. I held out the platter. "I thought you might like one. I'm Elena. I live just up the street." He smiled, a real, warm smile. "Marco, thank you, Elena." He lifted the plastic and took one. He bit into it. "Oh," he said. His eyes widened. This is wonderful, really. Do you sell these?" "I'm going to," I said. The words felt solid. "I'm on my way to the print shop now." "Well," he said, taking another. "You let me know when you're open." "I'll be your first customer," I smiled. "Thank you, Marco." I kept walking. I went to the print shop. It was small and smelled like paper and ink. A young woman at the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. I set the platter of lemon bars on her counter. "Please have one. And I need to order some business cards." "Oh, thank you," she said, taking one. "What do you want them to say?" I took a breath. I knew exactly. Line 1, Elena's baking. Line 2, special orders and catering. Line 3, my new phone number. She typed it. She turned the screen to me. The letters were plain, black on white, simple, deliberate. "That's perfect," I said. "How many?" I thought of my bank account. I thought of the future. 500, please, I said. I paid for the cards. I left the rest of the lemon bars on the counter for her and the other workers. I walked home. Buster trotted beside me. The sun was starting to go down, and the air from the bay was cool. I got back to my apartment. I took off Buster's leash. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window. My phone was on the counter, still dark. It did not matter if it rang. My revenge story from San Diego wasn't about fire. It was about this: a quiet kitchen, a sleeping dog, and a box of 500 business cards that would be ready on Friday. I had delivered it. And I was the only one who needed to know.